All right, mortgage delinquencies are on the rise in Canada right now, as well as credit defaults and auto loans and everything in between. So I'm going to be talking about, do we have a 2008 type scenario on our hands for Canada in 2025? Kicking it off with this article from Global News, mortgage delinquencies rising with Canadians in fragile financial state. So Canadian homeowners continue to face risk from a looming shock in mortgage renewals, even as the Bank of Canada lowers its benchmark interest rate. The CMHC said Monday that the mortgage delinquency rate, the proportion of Canadians who have missed payments on their mortgage for at least 90 days, continued to rise in the second quarter of 2024. Compared to the previous quarter, the delinquency rate rose just a few thousandths of a percentage point to around 0.192% by the end of June. That's up from an all-time low of 0.14% recorded in 2022 and from 0.17% seen in 2023. So, that being the case, 0.192% mortgage delinquency. If we go back to the US in 2008, they saw 11.48% people delinquent on their mortgages, and we're at 0.192%. So not very much of a close resemblance there so far. While Canadians continue to make payments on their mortgages, there are signs of stress bubbling up on other credit products, CMHC warns. Auto loans saw a significant increase in delinquency rates in the second quarter of the year, rising to 2.42% from 2.11% in the previous quarter. Credit cards and lines of credit also saw their delinquency rates rise over the first 6 months of 2024. Credit card and auto delinquencies can be leading indicators of mortgage delinquency rates. So if you see these spiking, you can bet that soon thereafter you're going to see mortgage delinquency start spiking. These patterns suggest that mortgage delinquency will continue to rise into 2025. Some 1.2 million Canadians have fixed-rate mortgages due for renewal in 2025, says CMHC. Now, I actually saw a statistic on this. About 40% of fixed-rate mortgages are actually renewing lower because a lot of people were taking 1 and 3 year fixed-rate mortgages over the last couple of years. I myself took a 2-year fixed-rate mortgage, but that was in the latter half of 2023. Most people at that time were taking a 1-year fixed. I just tried to be a contrarian. I don't know. Probably won't end up being the best for me. But anyways, that being the case, next year, you're going to have a lot of those fixed rate mortgages actually renewing their mortgages cheaper than what they're currently paying right now. However, for the 60% that are renewing, they're going to be renewing quite substantially higher, I would assume. CMHC projects housing activity will pick up in 2025, led by the Bank of Canada's interest rate cuts. Ottawa has proposed changes to expand the availability of insured mortgage and 30-year amortizations. A tighter Canadian housing market can also act as a cushion to distressed homeowners, even in a slower 2024 market. Further interest rate cuts will also stimulate other parts of the economy, including a possible tightening in the labor market. The better Canadians' employment prospects look, the more likely they'll be able to handle higher mortgage payments, she notes. Conversely, if Canada faces a sudden economic shock that leads to more weakening on the jobs front, mortgage delinquencies and defaults could rise higher than the CMHC currently projects. Now, just as an exercise here, let's see, on average, how much people's mortgages in Canada would actually go up if they got a mortgage in 2020. So in 2020, if you got your mortgage after March, the overnight lending rate at that point was 0.25%. So let's assume that you took a static variable rate mortgage like most people were taking at that time. Your variable rate mortgage would have been somewhere between like 2 and 2.5%, somewhere around there, depending on the lender and the prime rate at that time. So that being the case, the average home price in Canada is $694,000 as of today. And if that stays the same, let's just assume you had a 2.2% static variable rate mortgage, you would have been paying $2,100 a month. Now, if we actually adjust that to today's rates, and let's just assume you get around 4.2%, let's say you go variable again. Right now it's like 4.75%, but again, if you're renewing in the spring, it may be around that 4.25 or 4.2%, right? So your mortgage would go up about $600. Now, I don't think that's enough to make somebody default on their home if it's owner occupied. If you're somebody who owns an investment condo that's already cash flow negative on it, $500 a month, and rent has gone down, and now you have to pay an extra $600 a month, well, I could definitely see that being a problem, especially if you own a couple of those and they're renewing next year and you have to get a new tenant in there and you kind of get hit by everything all at once. I think there'll definitely be delinquencies for investors, but I think for homeowners, if you had to pay an extra $600 a month, you could probably figure it out. Now, this being the average price, which is not the price of my market of the Fraser Valley, BC, let's say $850,000, maybe you own a townhome or something like that. Your mortgage would be $3,300 after your renewal. When you got that home at 2.2%, it'd be $2,500. So it'd be like an extra, what is that, like $850 a month? That kind of starts getting a little bit scary, I would say. But yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see what happens with that. Now on to CMHC's financial stability report. Here they're talking about the credit defaults or credit delinquencies on consumer products and stuff like that. And what they have to say is, the combination of higher inflation and higher interest rate continues to put pressure on household finances. Many indicators of financial stress, which had declined during the pandemic, are now close to pre-pandemic levels. Signs of increased financial stress appear mainly concentrated among renters. Interesting. The rates of arrears on credit cards and auto loans for households without a mortgage, which includes renters and outright homeowners, are back to pre-pandemic levels and continue to grow. In contrast, arrears on these products for households with a mortgage have remained low and stable. So here in this chart, this red line is up here is credit borrowers without a mortgage. You can see the legend down here. And what you'll notice is mortgage holders are orange, and then auto loans with mortgage holders are, I don't even know, call it baby blue, whatever you want to call it. But both of these are actually the lowest on the chart when it comes to credit delinquencies, right? So, why is that? Well, I think for the majority of homeowners, there's really only been like in the last 2.5 years where you might be subjected to a lot of stress when it comes to your mortgage, because it's really only been in the last maybe 2.5 years where interest rates were actually higher or a lot higher than what they've normally been, like basically from the fall of 2022 until maybe a couple months ago. And then prices have only been substantially higher for maybe the back half of 2021 and then the first couple months in 2022, meaning that for the majority of people who own a home, like if you bought your home anytime prior to mid 2021 or even after, prices came down substantially in 2022, you're probably not subjected to, obviously there's pain, but not immense pain from these interest rates increasing. However, if you're a renter, well, you don't have assets that you can liquidate to pay off some of this debt and other things like that, but also your rent has gone up 50%. So a lot of these renters won't have assets that they can liquidate to pay off debt. On top of that, their expenses have absolutely ballooned through the roof. And again, if you've owned a home prior to the middle of 2021, sure, interest rates have gone up a bunch, but you paid substantially less for that home. And you have a substantial amount of equity in that home. So the only homeowners that are, for the most part, really experiencing pain right now are people who bought from like mid 2021 to probably close to the end of 2022. And then anyone who bought, from that point onwards, knew what they were getting into. They knew that the interest rates were going to be high. They were fully aware of all of this. And then of course, if you bought before that time, you paid a lot less and your mortgage probably didn't increase as much as some of the other people out there that are experiencing the pain. So here's a chart of mortgages renewing over the coming years that will see gradual mortgage payment increases. And this is the breakdown of all of them. So here we have variable rate mortgages with variable payments. We have variable rate mortgages with fixed payments, which is the green, which is the exact mortgage that I kind of ran in that exercise there with the mortgage calculator. And as you can see, in 2026 is going to be the year where most people are going to see a significant payment increase. And they're projecting a 60% payment increase for these holders in 2026. So this is obviously people that bought in 2021 at the highs, like I was talking about. Those mortgages are coming up for renewal and they're going to see a 60% increase because they're going to be going from 2% to 4% or whatever it's going to be at that time. But if you look at fixed rate mortgages with a term of less than 5 years, the yellow one, that's actually going down year over year after 2024. It's going down next year and it's going down the year after that. So it's really just the people who bought in 2021 with the cheaper static variable mortgages or just variables in general, because you can see the same thing with a floating variable rate mortgage. The red bar is also pretty high. Now, my thoughts on all of this is I don't think this is going to be what causes a substantial correction in the housing market. I think for a majority of homeowners, aside from, again, the bucket of people who bought in late 2021 to early 2022, those people, you're probably going to see delinquencies rise. But for the majority of people who own homes who bought them after that time frame and before that time frame, I don't think an increase of $500-600 a month is going to be what breaks the camel's back. But what could be the thing that breaks the camel's back is unemployment. And as you can see, every other time unemployment started upticking, then it really just went into a straight line into the sky pretty much right after. And as you can see right now, we've been climbing, but we haven't seen that parabolic rise yet, which could very well be in the near future here. Now, Something else I wanted to show you guys, right? If we look at the 80s, unemployment rose basically from 81 until, late 82. It came down from 83 all the way until, 1990, right? So if we look at a price chart and we go back all the way to 1981, when unemployment started going up, we saw about a 10% correction here. It went from 23 to 21, roughly a 10% correction. And if we go to 89, we also saw a 10% correction. Went from 45 to 41, roughly about a 10% correction. However, what's interesting about 1990 is that the correction happened before unemployment started rising. And then after it rose, housing prices pretty much just traded flat and were kind of range bound for a few years. Like you can see, prices were already down 10% by 1990. In 1989, unemployment rose all the way until 1992. And if we graph this out, prices dropped in 89, so before unemployment started going up. And then in 92, when unemployment peaked, prices were already nearly fully recovered from that 1989 peak. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens, right? I mean, typically speaking, in almost every other case, unemployment goes up, housing prices come down 10%. In this case, home prices, just like we see today, right? Home prices are already down, 15% here. In 89, home prices actually fell before unemployment started rising. And as unemployment was rising, home prices pretty much just traded flat. So, I mean, that is a possibility where unemployment does spike to the upside. I'd say that's a very likely scenario. But what is actually going to happen with home prices in that scenario, I would say, who knows? I mean, I would lean towards home prices going down. That's the obvious thing, but you never really know with these things. That's it for today. If you found this video interesting, please do subscribe. I'm that Agent Kelly. I'm making moves to move you. Peace.